Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. It's a little bit of a disappointing night in professional sports last night because the World Series got rained out. I heard, Russ, it was funny because, and we'll talk pre-show in a second, but I heard all this analysis on ESPN, how this is such great news for the Phillies because now they can start Ranger Suarez instead of Syndergaard in game 3, and then they're going to go with Nola in game 4 and Wheeler in game 5. So they're just skipping, I guess that maybe in game 6 or game 7, it's going to be all hands on deck type of situation.
Yeah, there's no question they get a little bit of a break here. It is kind of sad how it's fallen for Syndergaard because 2 years ago, nobody would ever do that for Syndergaard. You'd want him in there for the 2 games. But right now, this is where he's at. I think Major League Baseball got this wrong, though, because there's no reason to have an off day on Friday. It's only an hour time difference for Houston. And in a worst case scenario, they should have just kept it the same and had them play on Friday. And if you had to push the game back an hour to make up the hour time difference, then so be it. But honestly, this is not a West Coast trip. This is an easy trip to Houston. I went to school there. It's an easy flight. They actually, and look, what looks like an edge doesn't mean it's going to be an edge. Mm-hmm. On paper, it seems like it is, but there was no reason to sort of like bake that in there when you could have just done what I said.
And they were talking about the fact that now if there is a game 7, it would be on Sunday night going head to head against the NFL. And I can't remember. It's Baltimore and somebody.
It doesn't even matter what game it is. They're going to lose.
Right. Though game 7 of the World Series will probably lose in the ratings to a regular season NFL game, which is just a statement about what is the pastime or not. Okay, go with what your pre-show was.
No, that's it. My pre-show was that. And like I said, I don't get Major League Baseball these days. It's just like they had to have looked at this and said, well, should we do it this way? If we do, I know it's doing what the PA wants, but then we're giving a little bit of a competitive advantage. Do we care about that? And it's like, no, they're just sticking with the rule. And this is where I think the rule needs to be amended. And, that's what a commissioner's there for. I just think it's odd, but whatever. I mean, anybody could have a bad start any night, so it doesn't mean it's a definite.
No. There was one thing I wanted to talk about here. Oh, okay. Well, I'll wait. I'll wait until tomorrow to talk about that. We'll start with the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, November the 1st, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Joe Yerdon from Bleacher Report will be joining us momentarily. He's in transit. So we'll start, and we'll talk about the Tage Thompson game. The one thing I'll just say about this is not talking specifically about it, but the big deal that was made was this is the most points on Halloween since Wayne Gretzky and Bobby Clark scored. Honestly, pardon my French, who gives a fuck? It's just really, I mean, it's like, it was a good night. It was a really good night. That was the best night that a Sabres player has had individually, I think, since Pat LaFontaine. That's the headline. Not that he did the most on Halloween. It's not like he did it like, I don't get it's elevated because it's Halloween. I don't get it.
Yeah. To me, it means nothing. They're just Halloween at this point has just gotten out of control for a lot of different reasons. If we're now going to keep stats on Halloween, the world is ending. That's all I can say.
All right.
I do have a small subject I can bring up before.
Yeah, go ahead.
This one's worthy of debate. So the Omaha Lancers were fined by the USHL. I go to the Fall Classic, and they were at the Fall Classic, and their driver dropped out for the way home. And so, again, we have to remember these a lot of times these are, well, not a lot of times, these are high school kids and kids in different schools. And it would have meant a 28-hour bus ride on the way home. So the owner of the team called the league and said, hey, listen, kids got to go to school. It's ridiculous that the bus ride is going to get increased now. Let us pay for flights for them. And they're like, nope, rules say you can't do it. Well, they did it anyhow, and good for the owner of the Lancers, but he's getting fined $20,000. And I just think, I get the rules are rules things, but you do have to sort of look at it as a case by case and say, you know what? Yeah, I think taking a flight here makes sense rather than having these kids get home late and, whatever that might do to their classes and everything else.
Yeah, that's a strange situation.
They get these sleep-in bus drivers, you know what I mean? They bring them there. Yeah.
Yeah, the bus driver, and I know this because of I know a friend of a friend who was a bus driver for a touring band. The bus driver is sleeping when like the concert's going on or when the game is going on, and then wakes up at say midnight when everybody is getting on the bus, and then everybody's sleeping, they're driving, and it's like they're fresh as a daisy.
Right.
And not exactly a life that I would want to do, because you're basically working third shift and you're driving 8-9 hours or whatever, or depending on when the next gig is. And in this instance, I don't know. I mean, was this from Pittsburgh all the way back to Omaha? That's a 10-12 hour bus drive.
Well, it would have been 28. So your math's a little wrong.
28.
Yep.
Wow.
28-hour return trip. Sorry.
Oh,
but still, it's like 14.
Yeah, 14. That's more like it because 14 hours.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So there was an article published this morning by the sports business website Sportico with valuations of the 32 NHL franchises, and not surprisingly, the team that I cover and the team that Russ has followed for many years, the New York Rangers, are the two most valuable franchises, over $2 billion. The Leafs are at $2.12 billion. The Rangers at $2.01 billion. I'm a little surprised that the Leafs beat out the Rangers, but
I'm not. I mean, here's my initial thought on this. Mm-hmm. Really, the 6 leaders should be original 6 teams, and it's almost the case.
Yeah, the only one that's not is Detroit. Detroit is. It's the top. It's the original 6, and then Detroit is. It's the original 5, and then Detroit is 10th.
Right. You got the Kings shoehorned in there at 6, Flyers 7, but that's how it sort of should be. The shocking part to me is that the Canadians are down to $1.78 billion. Like that's shows you how far they have fallen, because even though they're selling out games still, they're probably not selling out every game. And they're probably selling less merch.
Yeah, maybe that'll pick up with Slavkovsky.
Maybe, but he's not played enough and done enough yet, right, to warrant that.
And I'm assuming that this is from the last year, so the Slavkovsky effect,
hasn't taken chase, right.
So
I will say this though, Ted Leonsis, give him a lot of credit, man. The Capitals to be in the number 9. Considering it's years now after the Stanley Cup, they're holding they're doing good business there. Detroit, just show how great those fans are, knowing that they're not going to be good for a little while, but they trust Yzerman, and like you said, they're 10th. Edmonton is 8th.
Well, here's some of the surprises.
Edmonton should be higher though, right, with McDavid?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's about right. You got to consider the size of the market.
Yeah.
I mean, if McDavid was in a big NHL, a big American media market like LA, I mean, LA would probably be in the top 3.
Yeah, and Flyers are always in the top 10. Like they have a great fan base and they buy a lot of merch and they travel, so that doesn't shock me.
Now, one of the surprising things here is I'm counting here. Detroit is 10th. 12th is the Vegas Golden Knights. At let's see here, $975 million, so under $1 billion. They're ahead of the Islanders, who are $920 billion.
That's a terrible thing. I mean, the Islanders should be higher. Arena, they should be higher than Vegas.
But okay. It's been 50 years. They're always going to be a second-class citizen in the New York area. They're not downtown. They're not in Manhattan. They're on Long Island or they're in Queens.
Yeah.
They're never going to be, okay, they had 4 Stanley Cups in the 80s. half their fan base is dead. That was.
No, they are not. Will you stop it?
Well, hey, I can say that because most of the fan base that was there in '67 for the Leafs winning is dead.
Yes, they are dead. But most of the fan base from the Islanders, because they were a new team, are like my age. Because when they were introduced, they were, in grammar school or junior high.
The Tampa Bay Lightning, in spite of winning two Stanley Cups, are 15th.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's Florida. At the end of the day, you could only drain so much from so much juice from the orange,
Yeah, the Seattle Kraken are 17th at $890 million.
That's pretty good, actually.
The Colorado Avalanche are 18th at $875 million.
That should be better, for a cup team. That should be better.
Now,
that was during the cup year, so it should be better.
Right. So let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum, because here's where I rub my hands with glee. The Arizona Coyotes, $465 million. Good luck getting that. Good luck. And I did hear more about what we talked about yesterday, and here is where this is going off the rails. Craig Morgan reported about the Tempe board, the council, meeting at the end of November. There is a very good chance that the approval of the bid for the property and for building the building will be put up for a referendum the following, and normally any referendum would be in November, when like local elections. I mean, they're having right now in Arizona, they're having their gubernatorial election and a Senate election in November, but I'm certain that there will be mayoral elections or city council elections and things like that in 23. Now, the thing is, there's no guarantee they're going to say yes. Do they want $1 billion real estate situation to have?
No, I mean, you heard I've been talking about the complaints about it with the airport being close by, flying over homes, with other things needing money. I think it's going to be very, very close.
But this is the situation. If the referendum is in November of next year, that means they're playing a second year at Mullet Arena.
No, it's this November.
No.
Are you sure? Double check.
I'm positive. The meeting for Tempe, the meeting for the Tempe board is this November 28th. If they pass it on in terms of having it be determined by a referendum, the referendum would be next November.
Okay.
So if that's the case, so then you're going to be playing another full year at Mullet Arena without any determination of whether a building. Yeah. Right. So if this is not a 1-year thing, and if they don't pass it, are they going to just keep them at Mullet Arena for another year? That's what I mean. This is
possible, I guess, now that it's sort of breaking like that. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Just to put it in perspective, the Coyotes would be the 24th most valuable MLS franchise, just behind FC Dallas.
Say that again?
The Coyotes would be the 24th most valuable franchise in the MLS, behind FC Dallas.
Wow.
So
that's sad. Now,
yeah, like the Red Bulls, as an example, are worth $525 million.
Now, okay, here's a team that is good on the ice, that is in a great location, and I think is just a financial basket case, and that's the Florida Panthers.
Yeah,
they're only worth $595. If I hit the Powerball, Russ, I would buy the Florida Panthers and move them to Quebec.
No, you wouldn't move them to Quebec. You wouldn't do that because Quebec's got other issues. I just found out recently there's like no rail service to get to the arena. Like the getting to the arena part is actually quite difficult. And if you think about it, there really is no NHL team now that doesn't have like rail service available to get near the place.
Well, Buffalo's got that. Buffalo's got that one-track rail service.
I know, but it still has it. Imagine not having anything.
Believe me, I've taken that thing. You've got like thousands of people like getting on it like it's a cattle car.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like most of these franchises, they all have that. They don't have it in Quebec. So Quebec's really not an option. The thing about Florida is it's the land that's worth so much too. If you gut it out, it should be worth a lot more than that.
Well,
because of the land.
But it's in Sunrise. It's not in Lauderdale. It's not in.
Doesn't matter. It's still prime real estate.
Yeah. So 30th is the Columbus Blue Jackets at $600 million. Carolina at $615 million.
I mean, it's not bad. It's not great. It's not bad.
Buffalo at $635 million.
That's bad.
That's bad because that is
it's a market. That's a good market.
Right. But I mean, Russ, you're going to start hearing, and we saw on the Sunday night football game to talk about the new Bills Stadium in Orchard Park. You're going to start hearing about the Sabres and Pagula wanting a new building downtown for the Sabres because KeyBank Center is, it might be almost 30 years old. And I know
how much more downtown could it get? It's easy to off the highway. Like what is?
No. I mean, I'm talking, but they'll probably build that building right next door to where it is now. Oh no, I'm just saying because of the age of the building, because of infrastructure and things of that nature, they're going to start asking around for a new building. And I don't know whether the fan base and the taxpayers want to pay that.
Right.
Just a couple more. Ottawa is $655 million. Up from $635 million.
It's still terrible, but the minute they get a new place, it'll go up a lot.
And well, no, see, that's the thing. They're talking about the valuation for the franchise being $1 billion, but it can only be $1 billion after they settle all the lawsuits that Melnick was in, and they get a lock on a building downtown. It's,
right. Yeah, that makes
I don't know if it's going to be LeBreton Flats or whatever, but so I mean, interesting stuff. Not that it's any kind of revelation that the Leafs and the Rangers with the two.
No, but like I said, the Canadiens' third is sort of a revelation. Like that's kind of rough. They should be ahead of the Rangers if you think about it.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the games last night. The LA Kings beat the St. Louis Blues, who are struggling right now.
It's brutal.
Yeah, the Kings won 5-1. Carl Grunstrom, former Leaf, with a couple of goals. Kopitar, Velarde, Kaliev, quick with the win. Binnington with the loss. Torpachenko with the only goal for the Blues. The Blues are 3-5 right now.
Yeah, between that fourth and fifth goal, might have been the fifth. I know the fifth got Binnington out of there, and he was yelling at somebody on the Kings bench. But I got to tell you, Craig Berube was cursing out his guys on the bench. He was screaming at them. He wasn't cursing them out the whole time. I'm sure I saw at least one or two things fly, but he was really getting at them, and that's a shame because they had better players than that, and you could just see they were sort of like dumbfounded.
Yeah, I mean, and Elliot Friedman and Jeff were making this point on their show. That the Blues really haven't. Now, okay, I have to say this. They played really well last year, and I thought they had a chance to beat Colorado until Nazem Kadri did his Nazem Kadri on Binnington. That being said, and I agree with this point, they really still have not recovered from losing Pietrangelo.
Yeah.
They haven't replaced him. They took the weird thing of replacing a big 6'4" two-way defenseman with an offensive guy in Torrey Krug.
Yeah,
they have good depth. Falk and Krug and Parayko, but they don't have that linchpin number one defenseman.
Because Parayko's never turning into that.
No, he's had injury issues defensively. I think he's inconsistent. He's big, but he doesn't really play big.
It's hard to replace that kind of guy, though, in this league. I mean, again, most of the time, 99% of the time, you're drafting that guy.
And this is the thing, and this is not revisionist history here. They were willing to pay Pietrangelo close to what he got in Vegas. The problem is, the hang-up was, that Pietrangelo wanted a no move clause, and they paid bonus. They paid signing bonus in the Vegas did, and Doug Armstrong will not pay signing bonus to any of these players. So it's like you have to go down that road with the players that are deemed to be special. Mm-hmm. And Pietrangelo was their captain, was their leader, won a Stanley Cup with them. You make exceptions.
Yeah, but I guess this is what ownership wants. That's probably why Armstrong's not doing it.
Well, I mean, okay, like I'm looking at their roster now, and right now, Tarasenko, Shen, Buchnevich, Saad, Falk, Krug, Parayko, and Nick Leddy have no trade clauses, not no move clauses. None of them have no move, and I believe I'm looking at the two big contracts that they just signed this summer, Kyrou and Robert Thomas. I don't believe that there is a no move, and they didn't pay any signing. So that is the mantra of that organization. We will not pay signing bonuses. We'll pay flat salary. And I don't know. The thing is, you have to say, if they make an exception for Pietrangelo, then they basically have to make exceptions for other players.
Well, where did they sort of rank? Do you remember in franchise worth?
Let's see here. Going back, Blues. The Blues are 24th at $770 million.
For a team that won a cup, that's not great.
Yeah, a team that won a cup a few years ago, and a team that's been in existence since 1967.
Not good.
Not good at all.
So that's why. I think that's your reason.
Now, I watched a little bit of Capitals Hurricanes last night. Ended up shootout 3-2 in favor of the Hurricanes. I know the Hurricanes are 6-2-1. I was not overly impressed with the way that they played. I thought the Capitals were basically, it was an even contest, gets to a shootout, fine. But like, I'm still skeptical of Carolina. There's still something. They have talent. They have a really good defense. Freddie Anderson had a fantastic year in goal last year during the regular season, but got hurt. And now this year, they're 6-2-1. I'm just looking up Freddie's stats here.
He's not as bad. I was just on another show talking about him.
Yeah, let's see here. Freddie right now is goals against 264, 896 save percentage. So yeah, save percentage is not good. It's him and Ranta. So they're winning in spite of their goaltending, but they're going to need their goaltending when it counts. And last year eventually do they give Kochakov a chance again, or is it going to be Ranta and Anderson for the whole year?
I'm not sure, but here are the last 4 games for Anderson: 844, 875, 839, and a 900 or 90%, however you say it. That's not good.
No, it's not good. But like I said, I mean, in that division, this is the thing. And right now, we're going to talk about like the 3.
Yeah, Ronta's at a 913.
We're going to talk about the 3 teams that have surprised us and 3 teams that have sort of disappointed us when Joe gets here in a couple minutes. Carolina right now in that Metro division, it's going to be tight, just like the Atlantic. This is not going to be a year like last year, Russ, where you had 8 100-point teams and then a 20-point gap in between the 8 that made the playoffs and the 8 that didn't make the playoffs. So hold on, I'm just messaging Joe. So, I mean, right now that's a situation where, you're going to need to win every game. It's going to be maybe 2, 3, 4 points between you making the playoffs and missing the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the start of the seasons this year were very important. I do. And I do think that some of the teams that had the starts they did are going to take them out of it. Like even the Vancouver Canucks, even though they made some decent moves, even with winning their last 2, it's going to be a battle to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the standings right now here, or at least I was until I had to go and look at Freddie Anderson's stats. Right now,
you're used to that.
Yeah, Carolina's in first place in the Metro with a 6-2-1 record, 13 points. New Jersey, surprisingly, is in second place with 12 points. So you've got 6 teams within 3 points of each other.
Yeah.
In the Atlantic, you've got one outlier, Boston, who's 8-1 right now, and then you have 6 teams within 2 points. Yeah. So as bad as Toronto has played, say,
Ottawa's 2 points behind with two games in hand of the Leafs. So look, the Leafs definitely need to get it in gear. They have to.
Well, yes, and we'll take some questions in the chat.
I don't know if magically turning the calendar does that.
Well, okay, and I was being facetious, but I'm just, when I said that this morning, I tweeted it out. It says it's okay, now it's November. Now the Leafs can start playing like the team everybody expected them to be like. I'm joking, half joking there, but last year that's what happened. For some reason in October, they were terrible. And then the calendar clicked to November. Maybe it was the Movember thing, and Austin Matthews, with his mustache was, but all of a sudden Austin Matthews started scoring like it was going out of style, and everything was beautiful. And Jack Campbell played like a good NHL goaltender, which we know he's not. So I who knows? Right now there are some differences from what happened last year. The team is completely different.
So it is being reported from Sportico that the Senators are officially for sale.
Yes.
So we knew that was going to happen pretty quick.
Yeah, as I said, there was no way that the Melnyk daughters were going to keep the team.
No.
I think they want, apparently they're going to retain whatever sale happens. They're going to retain at least a minority ownership.
Why not?
Yeah, and that's fine. It's their father's legacy.
Yeah.
But had he lived, I still think there was a good chance that team was going to move. It was
just because I think that's true, because the deals that were supposed to happen for a stadium and everything else soured because of him. So I think the fact that he's not there now and the team's for sale makes it much easier to try and start up those deals again to try and get that stadium, that arena.
Yeah. Now I'll just say this, because we'll start on me, because Joe said he's going to be about 10 minutes.
Okay.
In terms of the three, I'll start with one of the 3 teams that have disappointed. And that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. I expected them to challenge for a playoff spot, not make it, but challenge. They're not getting good goaltending out of Merzlikins. Korpisalo just came back from his injury. Defensively, they've given up 44 goals in 10 games. That's horrendous. I don't care, if Goudreau and Laine are scoring at their top level, you can't overcome a -18 goal differential. They're playing hideous right now. Now, they're a young team in certain areas, with like Kent Johnson and Cole Sillinger, but Russ, they added big names. They kept a big name in Laine. They were expected to be better, and they're nowhere close.
No, they're nowhere close, and it's kind of really bumming me out, because I really did think that they had a lot of things figured out this year. I didn't expect Merzlikins to take a step back, but that's exactly what he's done. And so, the Laine thing was just a temporary thing. You can't blame everything else on that.
Right.
But look, Gaudreau's got 8 points in 10 games. He's going to be his point-a-game player. Kent Johnson's got 6 and 9. He only got called up because Laine went down, so he's their second leading scorer, tied with Chinnikov. And then it kind of, it's dropping off. They don't have enough scoring. They just don't. Voracek, 5 assists. Jake Bean, 4 points in 9 games is pretty good. But these, their top 4 or 5 guys really have to produce for them. And if they don't, like Boone Jenner's only got 4 points. He's got 10 PIMs. If they don't, this is a team that's not going to be high on the differential list, And Laine hasn't caught fire yet, so that's something that needs to happen. Probably won't, hasn't happened yet. And Sillinger, slow start for him. Maybe he's got a sophomore slump. So they are where they are.
Now, was Columbus one of your three that?
Yes.
Okay, give me one. Give me another one of yours.
Another one of mine that is disappointing. Hold on, I got to pull the standings back up because, well, I'll say the Anaheim Ducks anyhow because I didn't pick them to be a playoff team, but I didn't pick them to be like the worst team. Gibson's, statistically having a horrible year. Their defense is awful. They've got a 278 winning percentage, Mike. A 278.
Yeah, but they beat Toronto.
I know. They beat Toronto. They don't have a win on the road. And I got to say, Dallas Eakins' time is his time's almost up.
Well, okay.
Verbeek's going to pick his own guy at some point.
Yes, and that's the thing. I'm pretty sure that Eakins is in the last year of his contract. Like Blashill in Detroit, where Yzerman assumed him when he took over. Verbeek assumed Dallas Eakins. So more than likely, if they continue on this and they have a struggling year, Dallas Eakins is not going to be given a new contract. I get that. I think that's realistic. But the thing is, I mean, in watching them up until the point that they made their third period comeback, they're disjointed, they're disorganized, they're young, they're making.
That's why I think Eakins is in trouble.
And now the bad news that came out yesterday, Jamie Drysdale was out 4 to 6 months. That's really a shit that, you want, even if he's making mistakes, you want him playing every day to sort of gain experience and learn what to do. And now he's probably done for the balance of the season, and you won't see him until training camp next September.
Yeah, even if you're tanking to some degree for Bedard, you can't let your other players not develop while that's happening. Right. And that's what the worry is here. Things are so disjointed, like everything's unraveled for this team. And you don't want a team to be unraveled all year because it's not a guarantee you're going to get Bedard anyhow.
Number 2 on my disappointed list is the Vancouver Canucks for obvious reasons. Yeah. They're 2-5 and they've won their last 2 games. They're 2-5-2. They should be better than this. They have really good goaltending. Their defense is terrible, and Quinn Hughes has been out. So I mean, that's part of the excuse. But even if Quinn Hughes is in there, they're a below average defensive team. I mean, blue line, their defense is bad. They're top heavy. They're sort of like the Western version of Toronto, but I think Toronto is better than them because Toronto at least has more defensemen. They don't. And, what's that?
Saying Toronto is better than them is a low bar.
Toronto's defense is, it was good until Muzzin got hurt. Now it's average. And when you're playing Justin Hall 20 minutes a game, it's below average. But you look at who Vancouver's playing right now, and they're playing Rathbone and Kyle Burrows and, Tucker Pullman. And it's not a good defense at all.
No, and Pullman may still be out. He was out.
Right.
Look, Demko's not done well. They're one of my teams that I'm disappointed in. Spencer Martin's done better than Demko. But Demko, I think, is putting too much on his shoulders because just in the games that I've seen, he's had good moments for a lot of the game, and then something happens with the team breakdown. They score, and things go south on them. That's a team that, like I said, I think they're going to struggle just to get into the playoffs. Maybe they get close, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's going to happen. Another team that I'm disappointed in is the Minnesota Wild. I think they should be better than 500. I know Fleury just got goalie of the week. Maybe that'll help, but only 1 win at home. I expect more out of them. I think they're another team that needs to get everybody scoring. As an example, let's see. I'm pulling up there. Rossi doesn't have a point yet. Zuccarello's leading the team. Kaprizov is second. Boldy's third with 8. Eriksson Ek 7. Kalen Addison with 7 assists. That was one of the great moves, by the way, for Guerin to get a guy that he knew when they drafted him. I had Kalen Addison highly ranked in his draft, and the only reason I think teams passed on him was because he was one of those guys that was a little spongy, didn't know how to eat right, didn't know how to train right, but he had a lot of offensive talent. but their power play for a little while was hot garbage. So Addison has sort of like helped that along. Hartman's got 5 points in 9 games. You're not going to expect the same year he had last year, but there's a lot of guys that are sort of like, not pulling their full weight yet. And their defense should still be a little better than it is. Their differential was surprising that it's a -4. But like I said, Fleury seems to be picking it up now. So,
yeah, they were on my short list for teams that disappointed, but I had to include the Toronto Maple Leafs as that team, and a number of comments in the chat about Dubas and Keefe, Keefe being fired. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, I'm not disappointed in the Leafs. I'm happy with what they're doing.
Of course you are, but I'm disappointed because I think they're better than this. Now the injury to Muzzin, I think, has wounded them. The injury to Murray, I would have more expectation that Murray in the 3 games that Shalgren played would have done better than 0-2-1. So against the competition that Shalgren played, which was Arizona, San Jose, and 0-1-2.
I have seen stats that may surprise you about the Leafs, but I can't divulge those now. Those will be on the Locked On Flyers podcast when we talk to you later.
Yes.
But
plug.
But the thing is, when is Murray coming back? When is the talk of Murray coming back?
Well, he got hurt on, I think it was like the 11th or 12th of he got hurt on the day of the Ottawa game. It was the 15th. So they said a minimum of a month, so at least another couple weeks.
Okay.
So, and he's on LTIR, so that was 10 games and 24 days. So that would have been probably next week as the minimum. But I would probably think if they said a minimum of a month, they were being conservative in terms of they want to make sure he comes back and he's not injured. You know what I'm saying? Like avoid a Peter Mrazek situation where he comes back in 2 weeks and re-injures the same groin. So they don't want that. So they want, if he comes back, they need him to be 100% and they need him to play. But the problem is that the goaltending hasn't been a problem. The problem has been their offense. They've scored 13 goals in the last 5 games. You're not particularly careful defensively. You still make bad giveaways, Nylander, Justin Hall, et cetera, Mitch Marner. And your offense usually covers up for that. And now your offense hasn't been scoring up to what it normally does. And it's not covering up for those defensive issues. I was listening to the 32 Thoughts. I was listening to Friedman and Merrick on their show. And, there's a lot of chatter right now about Marner and about, him throwing his temper tantrum and him being, and this is the thing. It's like, okay, Keefe called him out. He should have called him out. He made 2 dumb plays that ended up in the back of their net. If you can't take constructive criticism, then there's something wrong with you. But,
right. Well, that's to the general public. That's what it looks like.
Right. Now, give me $1 for everything that I've heard about, well, Mitch Marner's got a bad attitude. He's a spoiled brat, blah, 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 blah. To a greater or lesser extent, don't you think most of these guys who are star players are coddled and are not criticized? I think they are.
Not like when we were growing up. That's true.
Yeah. So, I just think that this is a symptom of this team struggling, of the pressure mounting. And I have to say this, and I like him as a guy, and I have respect for him, but I don't think it was out of line for the Toronto media to request to speak to Kyle Dubas after.
No, it wasn't out of line.
Right, but then I saw Greg Wyshynski on Twitter criticizing the Toronto media for asking for the GM after 10 games. Don't you think what's going on right now is worthy of a discussion?
Of course.
Jim Rutherford talked to the Vancouver media when his team was 0-5-2 and everybody was clamoring for Bruce Boudreau. I didn't hear criticism of the Vancouver media because they wanted to talk to Jim Rutherford. It's like, I'm sorry. It's like, this is in Toronto. The dealing with the media is part of the game, and you have to do it.
So let me give another team that on the good side of things, surprising me. We'll go New York Islanders because right now they're doing better than I thought. I'm still going to hold the line and say you're not turning Matt Barzal into a goal scorer, but he's leading the team in scoring with 10 assists because that's what Matt Barzal does. He's got more than a point a game. Leave him alone. He'll get his points. Be happy right now that Anders Lee seems to be better than he was a year ago, and Wahlstrom definitely better than he was a year ago, scoring points. Dobson definitely doing better and really getting close to being a star defenseman like I thought he'd be. So, all that stuff is going good. Now, on the bad side, Sorokin, while he's been great, Varlamov has not been great. And so that's all of a sudden something that maybe I didn't expect. End of the day, they're doing better than I thought at the start.
A team that I thought would be better, but I wasn't sure. And now they're 8-2 is Vegas. There were reasons to be doubtful. The injury situation, Eichel, the goaltending more than anything without Leonard. And right now, everything is working out. I mean, right now it's, Logan Thompson is playing well. Eichel is being the sort of dominant number one center that everybody expect him to be. Stone is healthy. Their defense is deep and looks really good.
Bruce Cassidy can coach.
Yeah. And okay. We know now it's like most of these coaches have a window.
Yeah.
They have, it's 3 or 4 years. There's Joe here. Hey, Joe.
Hi there. Sorry about that.
Nope.
We're touching on this because we're talking about like teams that have surprised us in terms of being worse than we thought, and teams that we are overachieving or have surprised us. And with 2 instances, with Boston and with Vegas, it's clear that most coaches now have a window where they can be successful, and at a certain point, they lose the ability to communicate a message. Montgomery. He had his off the ice issues, and he's come back and he's done a really good job in Boston after being an assistant. I think it was in St. Louis. And Cassidy gets ousted out of Boston. Wasn't getting along with the players. There was a divide there, and he goes to Vegas, and now they're 8-2, and his message is clear and everything is working. There's a window for almost every coach.
Yeah, no. The thing I've noticed after watching this league for so long is that every good coach runs into a time where the message runs empty, where like the classic hits, the classic statements, all that stuff, everything that would motivate and would get things done before, it just stops working. And at that point, it's up to the GMs to kind of realize that that's the case. And, listen, hockey players, they're never going to, well, more often than not, they're not going to actively mutiny against their coach. Because that's just that's not part of the culture, and that's not how things work. But the results will be very evident on the ice when they tune them out. Like that becomes abundantly clear when that's the case. But I don't know. I'm still flummoxed by Cassidy getting bounced in Boston. Obviously, that had to be veteran driven, but because he was still a good coach, they were still winning. They were still doing.
It was Bergeron driven. We have to say that because he wasn't signing a deal. Cassidy's gone. He signs his deal. Krejci comes back. Cassidy's gone. Like, come on.
Pasternak might not sign an extension if Cassidy's back.
Right.
His best friend is Krejci. All of a sudden, he comes back from the Czech league and signs a friendly 1-year deal. I mean, please, it was a mutiny without the M. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's up to that's up to Don Sweeney to recognize that. Anyways, when David Krejci comes to you and says, like, hey, you know what, I'm thinking to go back home. I think I'm good now. First question is why? What's the reason? What do you want to do? Why are you doing this? Like, what's going on? And if he's straightforward with him and he goes, listen, Cassidy ain't it, then you have to do that becomes question number 1 of the player exit interviews that season, to say, what do you feel about the coach? How do you think? And be honest. Don't give me, plain player speak and go from there. You have to be honest in those situations. Obviously with Jim Montgomery, it's a whole different thing because that was a whole different ball of wax, why he was
right. Because
let
he
go
was
in
doing
Dallas.
well in Dallas, and he's won championships in the NCAA. The guy can coach. The other thing I'm not surprised at, Linus Olmark is 6-0. I'm not shocked that he's the number one. He's the guy they invested the money in for a reason. Jeremy Swayman for the whole season probably wasn't going to be sustainable because he's probably not there yet. And that's another thing that's really turned out in their favor, that they didn't just dump him after last year, which was a bad year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the wild thing with that is that in hindsight, it looks, for a good part of last season, it seemed crazy that they gave Olmark 4 years when you had Swayman, and Swayman looked really good in that, 10 game window at the end of that season. You're like, hey, maybe that's their number one for the next, who knows how long. And Sweeney was like, maybe, but I can't put my faith in the future of this team based on 10 games. Now, 4 years to Olmark was probably more of a, okay, dude, what are you doing kind of thing. But that's what it took to beat out Buffalo, I assume, to get him in there. But
it was the fourth year.
The fourth year put it over the top. But Buffalo wasn't going to go 4 years because they had Luukkonen that they were still, keeping in mind that maybe he's going to take the job, and you don't want to block that up. Plus, you had Devin Levy hanging out there. You got Portillo. If you sign a guy for 4 years, you're telling those guys you got to wait 5 years before you even get a sniff at the starting job in the NHL. So I give him credit because Olmark is a good goalie, and he showed that last year. Those guys had basically identical numbers, him and Swayman, but Olmark's the vet, and he's been through it, and he knows what it takes, and having a system like what Montgomery has, boy, that's goalie friendly as anything. For as much as Montgomery's teams have success, they're kind of dull because they're so tough defensively. They can still score, but they make life very tough for other teams to get through.
Yep.
Now, Joe, we were sticking along with the coaching. The heat is now a little bit off on Bruce Boudreau after they won 2 games. So now the, burning him in effigy in outside of Rogers Arena is over with. But now that sort of a discontent has shifted east to Toronto because the Leafs go 1-2-2 on their 5-game road trip. They come back. They play Philadelphia on Wednesday, Boston on Saturday, so Carolina after that. So the schedule gets tough, and against teams that were relatively struggling or easy, they didn't show up. Everything is amplified by Sheldon Keefe calling out Mitch Marner in a TV timeout, and then Marner throwing a hissy fit and breaking his stick in the hallway. And then nothing is said after the game. The Toronto media asked to talk to Kyle Dubas, and they politely decline. And right now, the GM, I think, doesn't want to. And I've dealt with Kyle Dubas a lot. He's always treated me well, and I've been respectful to him. I don't know if you want to talk to the media right now because you have to have answers. Mm-hmm. And what answers? The first question out of them: are you going to fire the coach?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to fire the coach. Are you going to make a trade? Well, I'd like to make a trade, but I tried to make a trade with Carolina, and I didn't want to give up a draft pick, and I didn't want to take a contract, so I'm a little stuck. He doesn't have answers right now, so why would he want to face the media?
Yeah, it's an impossible spot because the spotlight always shines brightest in Toronto, and it shines the hardest when things are struggling. Keefe, to Keefe's discredit, things started off on a bad foot this season because you lose a couple of games early, and he's right away he's going saying the players aren't good enough, this, that, and the other thing, and you're like, buddy, we're like 2, 3, 4 games into the season, you're already saying we're not good enough, we're not doing things right. Like, it's kind of on you, right? Like that's kind of on his fault for that, but it seems very dysfunctional there right now. And again, take the sample sizes for what it is. If I think this is a different conversation had they not lost in the first round the last 2 years.
No question about it.
Because after they lost last year, everybody's like, well, this has got to be it for them, right? This is 2 years in a row they haven't gotten over the hump. And everybody, and not that the knives were out fully for Keefe, but the message the second they lost Game 7 was like, that's not his fault.
You can only hear so many times that things are going to be different this year, Joe. Like, you can
right.
You know.
Yeah, and like Eck has said in the show, well, they wouldn't have lost to anybody else other than the 2-time Stanley Cup champion, but that was who was in front of them.
Right.
They had you don't get to choose who you play in the playoffs. You know how you choose who you play in the playoffs? By winning the games that you should win. And by by losing to Arizona, Montreal, and Buffalo last year, they cost themselves points that they would have played Washington in the first round instead of playing Tampa Bay. And the same thing has happened this year. They lose to, Vegas is good. They lose to LA, who was a playoff team last year, but they lose to Anaheim and San Jose.
And Arizona.
And Montreal. In 10 games, they've lost to 4 of the worst teams in the league. You can't get those points back.
Nope. And they're out of – they don't have a lot of options either. They're stuck against the cap. They're capped on contracts. They have 50 contracts. So
this is why Dubas isn't talking to anybody, because not only could he not make that trade, why couldn't he make the trade? Because he's up against the wall about all these other things, which is his fault.
Yeah, he had to find Zach Aston Reese to get the 50 contracts.
But again,
and he's a good player. Don't get me wrong.
Again, a lot of blame has to be brought on Brendan Shanahan, who is really, really invisible the last year. And honestly, he's just letting Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe do their thing, and not interjecting much publicly. Mm-hmm. So I don't think fans have much faith in him anymore either, to be honest.
But here's where because you've covered the Leafs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't perceive, and I've been told by people, Keefe is not in danger. If they lose 20 games in a row, of course he's in danger. Right. But Keefe and Dubas are attached at the hip. If one goes, they both go. So if they're out of the playoffs in January, could you see like a bloodletting and all of a sudden both of them are fired and Spencer Carberry is the interim coach and, Shanahan takes over as interim general manager for the rest of the year until they bring somebody in? Anything is possible, but
you can't let it get to the point where they're out of the playoffs.
Right,
That's the point.
But what I'm saying is I don't think that Dubas has that bullet in the chamber to say, okay, I'm going to fire Keefe and I'm going to hire a new coach. I think I think it's Keefe or he's done.
Yeah, for Dubas. Listen, Dubas's contract is up after this year.
Right.
That's giant red flag number one.
Right.
They haven't extended him. They haven't done anything with that. Very easily expendable. Keefe is his guy going back forever.
Right.
Dubas bumped. He essentially bumped Babcock out. Well, Babcock bumped himself out of there. Let's be real. But like that's part of the deal. And that was Lou's guy. So it's a little different. But there's zero doubt that Sheldon Keefe is his guy. There's no doubt about that. So if he fires him, it's not the same situation, but it's parallel to what happened in Buffalo when it was Darcy Regier and Lindy Ruff. And they were a package deal. They were a package deal for 17 years.
Right.
And instead of both of them going, Darcy fired Lindy and Darcy hung out still. And it made no sense that they did that. And it ended up ending 7 months later anyways, because
Ron Ralston and his gardening gloves. Yes.
Right. Ralston was an interim. Ralston was an interim, and then they extended him for 2 years based on, the last 12 games of the season or whatever it was. It was, it was dumb.
Kyle Dubas is like a red shirt guy on Star Trek right now.
Right.
That's what he's like right now.
He's security officer Wilson.
Right. Dubas does. He has no recourse on any of these things. Like he can't make a trade because of the cap and the contracts. He can't fire the coach because his head is on the plate. If not right at that moment, very soon after. So
that's why he's up in the box cursing, because there's not a lot he can do.
Right. So it's unenviable. Doing anything in Toronto is unenviable anyways because of all the pressure. But it's a bad setup. And, a lot of that, a lot of it's Dubas. A lot of it is, Lou kind of handing off garbage contracts and making that situation worse. But it's your job to do something. You have to do something to make it better.
How would Seth Jarvis look in a Maple Leaf uniform right now? Because that's the first round pick they had to trade because Lou gave Patrick Marleau a third year. Stuff like that. So not all of this is on Dubas, but some of the decisions that they've made in terms of contracts, some of the decisions that they've made in terms of trades. He didn't want to make. He wanted Ethan Bear, but he couldn't give up a draft pick because if he gave up a draft pick, he'd only have 3 picks left for next year.
Yeah.
So.
It's bad. Nobody's gonna have sympathy for the Leafs. Absolutely,
No.
nobody does have sympathy for Leafs. But it's, you go through time, and people killed him for the Marner contract, and it turned out that was probably the right idea. Probably a little ahead of schedule, but that was the right idea. The Tavares contract murdered him. It's $11 million every year. That's which Tavares is still a good player, but
he's been their best.
He's up to
not $11 million
scoring for them. Yeah,
I know that, but okay, that was the price you pay, and we'll get off the Leafs in a second here. That was the price you paid to get an unrestricted free agent. Shut up.
Right.
But the problem was, and I'll say this till I don't have breath in my lungs. The problem was the precedent that was set by the Nylander contract. He succumbed to Nylander at the 11th hour, gave him basically everything he wanted, and that told the Judd Moldaver, the agent for Matthews, or Darren Ferris, the agent for Marner, that I can put their feet to the fire, and in the end I'm going to get what I want.
Mm-hmm.
They did. The Tavares contract, okay. I mean, maybe they didn't need Tavares because they had Nazem Kadri as the second line center, but how undependable Nazem Kadri was in Toronto, and that was the reason they had to trade him. But I don't think it was the Tavares contract that set the world on fire. I think it was the precedent sent by the Nylander contract, and then Matthews gets $11.6 million, but they don't get 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then Marner gets $11 million because Matthews got $11 million. I mean, right. It's set a precedent, and now $40 million on 4 players has killed them the last couple of years.
Well,
I was going to say that, and you look ahead, they've already got 72 million for next, on the cap for next year right now. I know the cap's going to probably bounce up a bit, but you're starting with $11 million to work with.
Yeah,
make a pile of RFAs to deal with.
I was gonna say make that 17 million, because I'm convinced Jake Muzzin will probably be on LTIR next year, because I don't know if he's ever going to play again. Everything has been very, very secretive when it came to Muzzin and his injury. But let's finish with this, because we held off talking about the Sabres.
Well, they're one of my teams that are pleasant surprise. I'll lead it into Joe like this. I was watching the game yesterday, and again, I am not shocked at Tage Thompson. There is a point where big power forwards finally kicks in for them, and it has finally kicked in for him. He always had talent. He wouldn't have been drafted where he was if he didn't. His dad's a coach. He knew hockey. It's just, hey, it took him a little while. But, he's scoring. Quinn's scoring. Dahlin's scoring. Skinner's back to scoring.
Yep.
At least, even if their defense isn't great and their goaltending's not where you want it to be, at least they're going to score some goals this year. So I'm happy to see what I'm seeing out of them.
Wow. Yeah. You mean Jeff Skinner started scoring as soon as Ralph Kruger got fired?
Yeah.
That's the thing. The funny part about Buffalo hockey fans is that everybody's so tied in with the Bills, that hockey's treated like football, where every loss is a destructive, oh my God, what's happening loss. And then every win is like, that's right, time to party. And it's like, guys, no, everybody's got to pump the brakes. Even post game last night, some of the questions at Tage were like, oh, how are you going to go out and celebrate tonight? And it's like, you're going to celebrate by going to bed, because they have practice in the next morning. They got a game Wednesday, but it's listen, Grano, it seems so easy when you think about it. Lean into what your players do well, and make sure that they're in the positions to do well for, all the time. And weird how that works. And, even with Thompson, people are starting to get a little bit where are the goals? What's happening? Well, now he's got 9 points in 2 games. He's shooting the puck constantly. 17 shots in 2 games is bonkers. That's OV territory for that stuff. But
that one timer he scored the first goal, that was an Ovechkin goal. It's from top of the faceoff circle. My goodness,
that's that shot. And listen, I know he can't do it all the time, but every time you see that him wind up for that, you're like, oh dear God, get out of the way. Now he's never going to be a guy in the hardest shot competition, but I would bet anything he consistently tops 100 on those shots. Every time, because it is I don't know. Shots like that are so few and far between. Ovechkin's got it. Stamkos has it. Thompson has had it. It just was inaccurate and, not probably over relied upon in the past, where they're like, well, we know he can do this, so let's just have him do it. And when you're playing him third and fourth line minutes all the time, it's you're not going to get a lot of practice at it. But with the way he plays, I mean, geez, it's the slap shot's awesome. It's incredible to watch. But I mean, think about the goal where he, little toe drag in traffic, and then he just snaps it, and it's past the goalie in a blink. That kind of thing makes him so dangerous, because you're not expecting a big guy to do that. Even if he's capable of doing that, you see him toe drag, and you're like, oh, he's going to try to weave around me, and then whoop, puck's gone, and it's in the net. That's wild. It's so crazy to see a guy that's had a lot of talent and a lot of ability just have it just turn, switch gets flipped by a coach, and then suddenly he's incredible.
And just to continue on the coaching connection here, if somebody asked me, what is the main reason why the Sabres are where they are right now, and I still don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I'm not 100% convinced of their goaltending, but they're a better team and they're on an upward track. Mm-hmm. It's Don Granato. I mean, Don Granato has infused Rasmus Dahlin with confidence from where he was a couple years ago. He's the one who put Tage Thompson up the middle when Middlestat got hurt. I mean, players who were not playing good under Kruger are playing well under Granato. There has to be a connection there.
There is, because Granato got to see it from the bench as his assistant for a year to see everything that Ralph was doing. And listen, I know he respects Ralph and all that. Like he's never going to dog him directly. There are things that he says, though, that run very contrary to everything that Ralph has done and ever said when he was coach. So that to me tells me that Don was, obviously Don's paying very close attention. He's an assistant coach. You have to do that. But when he's pulling strings like this and making these moves and they just end up working out, you wonder, like, did Ralph take anybody's advice? Did Ralph listen to any of the assistant coaches? Did he do any of that? Or was it just like, nope, this is my way. We're going to do it this way. And that's that. Because it sure seems like that was definitely the case, because otherwise, how are you putting, how are you having Skinner practice with the taxi squad and not putting him on the line? How are you putting him on the fourth line? How are you putting him with Marcus Johansson and Vlad Saboka, and putting Johansson at center? Like, that's all these dumb moves that Ralph did. Don has done
You don't want to know what Johansson's doing for the Capitals either.
He's playing. He's playing great. He loved Washington, and he's playing the wing. The wing. Like, they made him play center for the first time since 2014 when he's here.
And because Ralph Kruger had the ear of ownership, and had basically, it sounded like he was the director of player personnel, because they went out and got Taylor Hall when they already had a left winger. They had a left winger that almost scored 50 goals, making $9 million. So, in free agency, let's go get the same position guy making $8 million.
That I have a different theory.
They did Taylor Hall a favor. That was Kruger being his former Edmonton self, doing a favor to a guy he liked in Taylor Hall. Nothing more, nothing less.
My theory on how that happens, and signing Eric Stahl happens, and all that stuff that happened in that weird ass year, that happens because it was already known. And like, listen, Adams was the GM then. Like, that was his first year.
Right. That was his buddy.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, yes, he knows Stahl, obviously, yes, but that was when you go back and look at the Eichel timeline. The summer Adams was hired, Eichel was like, I want out. I'm not hanging out for this. That was their last ditch effort to try to win him over. You go and get Hall, a guy that supposedly wanted the Sabres to be in on when he was traded the first time, when he was traded to Jersey. Supposedly, I take it for grain of salt all the way on that. But you go back and get him anyways. And you're like, okay, Ralph knows him. He knows how to make it work. You go get Stahl because he needed a team. Adams knows him. Great. Go with who you know. And listen, if you're trying to prove to Jack, like, no, listen, we are capable of turning this around. We're going to change your mind. Watch us do it. And everything collapsed in on itself in the most unbelievable, like the most glorious tire fire you've seen this side of Springfield. Like that. I mean, it was just such an unbelievable collapse of Hall couldn't score.
It was like an old Cheektowaga roof after a 2-foot snowstorm.
Right. It was, Stahl was terrible. Like all these things that happened were just like everything malfunctioned completely. And then Eichel breaks his neck, and it didn't even matter what they did anyway. So it was just whatever. Just trade everybody, get him out of here. This is done.
Last bit here, departing from hockey. I saw your tweet regarding the TJ Hawkinson trade by the Lions. Joe, you and David Alter, I have so much sympathy for
Kevin
you.
Allen.
And Kevin Allen as well, because we thought, okay, they're going to score and their defense looked good on Hard Knocks. And now, I mean, Hawkinson, didn't he have like a year left in his contract? I mean, or was he, I mean, you don't, when you're a team like that, you don't trade your good player, but that seems to, the NFL now is starting to emulate Major League Baseball and the NHL.
They did get some good draft picks. They gave up some picks, but they upgraded on their picks. I see the sense of it if they feel like they're going to stink the rest of the year. So
what gets me is that Hawkinson's a top 5 tight end in the NFL right now?
That's the problem.
Where's the first round pick?
And you traded him inside your own division.
Who gets the first round pick though in a trade? Like honestly,
when he's a top player and you're trading him to a team in your division that you still have to play one more time at home.
Yeah.
Yes, you get a first round pick. You don't take a second and a third and say thanks.
I mean, Christian McCaffrey.
And you hand them 2 fourths on top of it.
They did hand him 2
Give
fourths.
Them 2 fourths and you're one of your best players for a second and a third round pick. Get lost.
But the NFL is getting like Roquan Smith gets traded to Baltimore. This deal. I don't know about the Kadarius Toney deal to the Chiefs because there's some questionable things about him. It sounds like the Bills are going to make a deal before the deadline. I hope they do. They should.
They need safety help. They forget the running back. They need safety insurance.
Yeah, and if they say Milano has got a minor injury, but if you he's had situations where he's been out for weeks on end, and he's extremely important to this defense. So yeah, they better stock up. But
I mean, the crazy part is that you make a trade like that when you're like, okay, we're shooting for the bottom, we want the number 1 pick. They're already the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like they're a half game worse than Houston, and Houston is god awful. Like the thing with Detroit that's the most frustrating is their offense has been incredible all season. Their defense is World Football League level awful. Like I mean, we're talking Birmingham Fire type stuff with them. Like that, it's so polar opposite of each other, and like the offense clicking with freaking Goff playing quarterback. Oh my god! Think of how much you have going for you there, where you're able to score a ton of points with that guy as your quarterback. Now, listen, I know he went to Super Bowl, whatever. He's $40 million. He's overpaid. He's not good. And the fact that it's quarterback or bust in the draft for him, which thankfully there's a few of them. But knowing them and their history, they're probably going to pick the wrong guy, and the cycle will continue on forevermore.
And Chase Claypool was traded from the Steelers to the Bears for a second-round pick. So
what are the Bears doing?
I don't know. They traded their best linebacker, and they trade for a wide receiver who apparently everybody in Pittsburgh hated Chase Claypool. But anyway, thanks, Joe, for coming on the show. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Joe Yerdon, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.